Well, good morning, everybody. How are we doing? This is Jeremiah. We are having another fantastic webinar. We are following up on a previous webinar. This is kind of diving more in to how to use Land Effects to the best, to really, it's designed to be used in a certain way. So obviously it's best if you kind of use it in that way, but there's all kinds of little tricks and organization ways and just things that you can use it that it was intended for that will give you the most optimal and most efficient usage of it. And this will show that. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, getting the most value and efficiency out of this incredible product, then you are in the right place. I have a couple just very quick housekeeping items. First, this is absolutely being recorded. So you will be able to show this to others and say, see all the cool stuff I learned? You can learn it too by watching the recording. But also, you are here with us live on this little journey. You can ask us questions along the way. We thrive on that. Really love that interaction. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you have a little Q&A icon. I recommend just clicking that right now so you can get that little dialog box set somewhere so you can see it, because you'll notice you will be able to see the answers that we type to other people's questions. So that's kind of handy. Not everyone has to ask the same question. And also, it's going to be a little faster for you to be able to type a question into us. So it just makes a great little companion while you're watching the webinar here with us. So that being said, buckle up and get ready. Jess is going to take us away on this ride.
Hey, thank you, Jer. Good morning, everybody. It's a beautiful day where I am today, and after this fabulous webinar, I'm really looking forward to doing some things out in the sunshine. Hope everyone is looking forward to something wonderful today and this weekend too. Before we get started, I just wanted to plug real quick that LandFX has begun our photo contest for 2025. Just head to landeffects.com to see more information. We've got a power tip on it. We've got lots of information on it, but if that's something you're interested in, if you happen to have designed, at least one thing with Land Effects that you're really proud of, get some good photos of it and send it in to us and enter into the contest. My name's Jesse. I work in usage support here at Land Effects. I work in some of the video production as well, and I'm just a general Land Effects enthusiast. Today, we're going to be talking about project organization, preferences, detail folders, and project templates. And then we're going to be getting into some good demonstrations on using project organization, getting a little deeper in there, really hoping that after today's webinar that you feel comfortable using the project organization tab. We'll get into the detail explorer and the folders, how to use that. And we'll get into a couple of scenarios with preference sets on making new ones and restoring some of our defaults. And we'll get into setting some schedule standards using our preferences as well. And we'll round it out, hopefully, if we have time, uh, with using project templates. So project organization is the next door neighbor of the project list. As shown here, it's found on the FX Admin ribbon tab inside the project list button. I think a lot of our users look at this and wonder what it is and what it could be used for. And a lot of those same users extensively use our detail system. While the project organization tab is the detail explorer, if that helps anyone understand it better. It displays your projects broken down into designations, and those designations are the folders that organize and contain your details. You may already be using your own detail folders, maybe setting project detail folders as well, but not choosing to view your projects from the organization tab. The project list tab has its strengths, like viewing things in numerical and alphabetical order, and that can be an easy way to find something, especially with few projects. But if you're doing dozens of projects a year and you're a 5+ year Land Effects user, project organization is going to help you out a lot. We get questions on how to archive many projects at once, and a great way to manage that is by using project organization to organize projects by year, and then you can simply collapse that year's projects when you don't want to look at them. Project organization and detail folders allow for 4 levels of hierarchy. As seen here in this example, the first level is the folder testing projects. Then we have the year within that, 2025, and then the folder irrigation testing, and the final folder and level of imperial irrigation testing within the project, with the project 2025 imperial irrigation testing inside of that. And then here are just some good side-by-sides of the Project Organization tab, the Detail Explorer, and the Windows File Explorer. I know if you're looking at all of these for the first time, you might not see the full connection, but really you're kind of viewing the and accessing the same file tree within all of these three windows right here. And then if this example is any further for folks to envision how project organization can be used, here's two different breakdowns, a simpler one and a little more detailed version. Note the project numbers that have been given, even the simplest project structure is using the year and the project name. And that's just going to be just that's going to tie back into your detail folders and just going to be a really obvious clue about what that project is, where to find it, when it was started, those kinds of details. And the other example has the job type also included in the project number. And those project numbers, they're also reflecting codes that are assigned to the detail folders as well. We'll get more into that, but just starting to prime you now thinking about those things. Moving into preference sets, if you've ever created a land effects project, you know one of the steps is assigning a preference set. Preference sets are the look and feel of your land effects. They are how you achieve your standards inside our software. Now, it's important to understand that preference sets are shared by everyone on an Office server, shared online folder, or cloud data configured account with multiple users. Preferences are accessed really from any of our tabs, any of the main FX tabs across your ribbon. Each tab has a button that will take you to that tab's specific preferences. But from FX Admin, you can access all six. And once you're within the preferences dialog, you can move between the tabs. So you don't need to bump around from each ribbon tab to find that tab's preferences. You can just get whatever preferences on your screen open, and then you can move to the other tabs from there. Preference sets are assigned to projects as the project is created. Always double check what preference set is assigned to the project before really any work starts being done. Preference sets dictate what reference note divisions you're accessing, what detail library you're looking at, and there even the difference between an imperial or metric preference set is how you access our database when you're like pulling irrigation equipment in. So when you select either an imperial based or a metric based preference set, you're priming our database to provide you with our backend data correctly based off of those unit settings. So it's really important um, just to ensure that the correct preference set is being chosen as the project is being created. Now, there are some easy hacks to ensure that happens. The list sorts itself alphabetically. So take advantage of that by setting the most current and default preference set to begin with either a hyphen, the letter A, or the number 1, and this just increases the likelihood that the correct preference set is chosen. If necessary, the assigned preference set can be changed in the Project Manager dialog or the General Preferences dialog. But be cautious about changing preference sets midway through projects and just about making preference changes ever. Getting into some best practices, a new preference set created for each unique instance of required standards is going to be the golden rule for preference sets. I have some examples listed here for instances that would require individual preference sets. Do your best to not test changes and updates in active preference sets. If anything, once a new set of standards is created and saved into a preference set, it's best to start applying that to new jobs only. Anything else can be carried out with its current preference set. Of course, we're happy to help with any strategy involved behind that. in the event that preference sets need updated and changed during active projects. And yes, preferences seem super scary. There are a lot of buttons and a lot to know about preference sets, but thankfully, everything inside of the preferences dialogues are clickable and viewable. The best way to understand them is to just start using them. There is just too much, even potentially for an hour-long webinar, to really get into and dive deeply into every setting in all preference sets, but I will run through some notable settings. And some of those standouts include your licensing and install information, your text styles, your layer and block layers settings, your numeric display settings, language string settings, and your saved dim styles. And if you see in that screenshot there, we are in the general preferences tab right now. We also have a manage setting as well too. Um, That's going to be really important for creating, deleting, backing up, and restoring preference sets as needed. And this is also going to be where you manage your permissions and you archive preference sets. And so these are going to be preference set specific permissions for whatever preference set is active when you select the manage button. And anyone with read permissions can use. Anyone with write permissions can modify the preference set. And anyone with admin permissions can adjust those read and write permissions. And across the individual preference tabs here, some other important settings include your reference note divisions, as well as the default callouts and schedule defaults for reference notes. Schedule defaults are an important thing to pay attention here because we get a lot of questions that go along the lines of, we'd like to stop exploding and editing our schedules to be a certain way just to regen them and lose those edits. There's a strong chance that those edits you're making can be saved into the schedule defaults. In planting, we've got the plant label styles, all of your custom plant sizes and fields. Your irrigation preferences include your schematic irrigation defaults, your pipe data defaults, and your schedule defaults. And again, I'm just touching lightly on some of the bigger topics within each of these preference sets. All of them on their own could probably be their own hour-long webinar. We've got great extensive documentation on each of them. Um, Take some time to read through it and always reach out to us if you need anything explained a little better. But focusing now on detail preferences, we'll tie this back into the overall project organization and detail folder system because we have some key settings here that dictate how those systems work. A major setting that cannot be overlooked is the detail library location. It's here in the detail preferences that you connect land effects to your land effects detail library. And I know that sounds a little obvious, but because this is set in a preference set, that means different preference sets can access different detail libraries. Meaning, a preference set created for a specific client accesses the detail library used for that client's work and no others. But it's also important to understand this location because if any install locations change and suddenly details are missing, head to your detail preferences and confirm the library location.
Actually, I need to,
We have
Jesse, I'm so sorry to just, but actually we were unable to make the detail library set to the preference set. So that's the one
great.
tiny little handout that is actually set to the install. So
Awesome. Good to know.
that's so yeah, just to make sure we clarify because and just to very quickly say why it actually totally makes sense. If you opened up a detail and you go, oh, this is the wrong preference set, then you would go and you would change it. And so that was we like, oh, but then they would be changing the preference set for that project. And so we couldn't have it be actually saved with a preference set. It would be too prone to people changing it all the time for that exact purpose. So for that exact case where you do need different detail libraries, it's actually a very simple solution. You are going to need separate land effects folders, and you just simply map a different drive letter to each. But so that but that is a very edge case. Most people won't need to do that. The important thing though is that yeah, you can set your detail library, and it just might be best for it to not be in the land effects folder. That's why that setting is there. So some people go, yeah, I have my land effects folder here, but I'd rather have my detail library over here, and that's why there's that setting there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the clarification, Jer. I hope everyone caught that as well. So getting back into the detail options, we have three important options within your detail preferences: the copy details to project folders, add details referenced in callouts, and set numeric divisions for all details. The first two settings we recommend for just about everyone, but especially those working in firms with small to large size teams. Copying details to a project folder allows you to work with a standard set of details, pull them into projects, and edit as necessary. It also ensures that if details are imported from other projects, true copies are made so any edits don't affect the detail instance in the project you grabbed it from. Really, you should only not use this option if you work independently or with such a small team that detailing work is all communicated. This option, copy details to project folder, prevents someone from making unwanted changes to a detail that others rely on. Adding details referenced in callouts means if you import a detail from a project that has other details called out in it, you get all those details. This just allows you to ensure all references stay linked. If details are highly customized for unique situations and you don't want those reference details because you need to create new unique details to reference, you would uncheck this setting. But that is another unique scenario, and we suggest the add details referenced in callout setting just be checked for the majority of our users. And then setting numeric divisions is only necessary if you're using our standard details, organized by the Construction Specifications Institute system, the CSI system. This forces you to choose a division if there isn't one assigned to the detail already, which the details should already be saved into its correct division, especially if you're using the setting like this. And then the CSI division then gets saved into the detail number as well. All right, talking about the Detail Explorer. The Detail Explorer is an interface that connects your CAD platform to your LandFX detail folders. From within CAD, using the interface, you can add new folders, edit folders, delete folders, print details, import and export folders, and batch process details within folders, all without leaving CAD. And personally, I think our Detail Explorer is a much more intuitive way to interact with a detail folder system. The Detail Explorer comes with two primary categories: the detail section and the standard details section. The details section is a general category that is the ideal place for you to build out your own detail library, as well as where your project detail folders will save by default. The standard details category is based on the CSI system, and of course, you could add to it if you want to, but it's really not there for you to take apart and delete and move things around because it is based on such a robust existing standard and system already. And then also the Detail Explorer allows you to preview and edit and open individual detail files. It's a very powerful thing that if you're not using, to be able to go into a folder of details, select a detail, select the preview flyout, and actually get a good look at what the detail is. And then it allows you to move and print and delete them as well. And I'll show this from within CAD, but if anyone who is watching right now is already familiar with our Detail Explorer, if you'll notice in the center of the screenshot there at the bottom, there's three new buttons. If you like using buttons versus the right click menu to allow you to edit, delete, and print out individual details. Projects should be given project-specific detail folders. The option to copy details to project folder prompts for this to happen if a detail folder has not been set. And that happens as the first detail is added to a project. When you use the project organization tab to create your projects, you're setting the location for the project detail folder at the same time, which is a great thing to take care of together. If needed, the project detail folder can be set when creating a new project and then further managed from the project manager dialog. Setting up your own detail library should be a goal, even if the library is just your most used land effects details. But couple that with the copy details to project folder option, and that's a great starting point to building your own details. I'll show this here shortly, but details are moved through drag and drop methods, and it's likely that you don't need to drag and drop entire folders, but rather build new locations for individual details to be moved or copied into. Either way, start small with tests you create to get the hang of it. If details are actively added to and being used in projects, the folders they live in can only be moved, though they cannot be copied. Backing up your folders containing the actual detailed drawing files is as simple as highlighting the folder or category you want to back up and selecting the export button. In the example on this slide, highlighting the top detail folder and selecting export would export that entire library saved in that folder layout. The actual detailed drawing files are not automatically backed up through another tool or method like updating the plugins. But the land effects system reads the categories and folders of yours and our detail library through an XML file stored and saved in the top level land effects details folder. The index XML is how the system finds your details within your folders. A dot back of the XML is created each time there is an edit to the folder structure and can be restored as necessary. There is a chance that the backup index XML becomes unusable too. Say there's been too many edits and the index backup now also contains something wrong. When you back up your projects and preference sets, either manually or while you're updating, you're also backing up the detail folder index XML. And that will be found in the land effects data backup folder. That's just another great reason to back up often. Now getting into project templates. We get lots of questions on the ability to easily reuse data like plant palettes, and of course, this is possible through project templates. Think of them as a central inventory of your most used land effects data. Templates are really going to save yourself continuously creating items newly and from needing to remember which projects have what. Templates will begin as projects that are then saved as a template, all done in the project's dialog. Templates are updated either by editing the project that was used to create the template, or maybe a project that is then based on the template that is then saved as a template, but you choose to overwrite the existing one. That's how the editing process works. And with project templates, there is obviously the ability to base projects on templates. I believe that was the original way to use templates in Land Effects, but it has since been improved in a much more convenient and functional fashion, which allows you to import what you need from projects as necessary. Now, basing projects on templates does enable the ability to only have one template that's full of everything you may ever need in a project, and you want to pull that into every project you ever work on. But we do think the better and more organized option is to import what you need as you need it. Ideally, you will create projects that will only be used as the template they get saved as. And that's a great opportunity to start a template folder within the project organization. Then, while that project is active, you can import everything you need for that template from other projects and perfect and standardize the data and then save it as a template. Remember that template reflects what they, remember that templates reflect what they hold in them. You have to ensure that your templates using real world equipment like site furnishings or irrigation equipment are still current and available. Once the data is saved into a project or template, it is no longer connected to our backend data system. And the world of templates is yours to set up as you see fit. Here's some straightforward examples, and again, these ideally would all be separate templates that items are imported from as needed. So planting templates could be regional natives, office standards, as in like a 2025 office standard planting template. You could do them by nursery. Concept planting templates could be by seed distributor, a restoration concept planting template, an erosion control concept planting template. You can build out lighting templates. You could build out irrigation templates. Just a word of caution and wisdom regarding irrigation templates. Those are probably going to need the most oversight. It's going to be best that if you do work with irrigation templates, that you are staying diligent, that the equipment being held in the irrigation template is still offered real world and is still current. And we do our best to reflect our manufacturer connection with real world offerings as well. So you could use that to review and then double check with the manufacturer as well and just make sure that you're changing things out as necessary. You can build out reference note templates, which could be anything from site furnishings to hardscape. And you can build out detail templates as well. All categories of detailing can be made into templates. Personally, I like to make um, either a detail project, but even then, the best thing is just going to be using the new button within the detail manager to pull copies from hopefully standard detail library locations that you have created for your office standard details. And you pull those new in from the detail manager, and they'll create copies as they come in. All right, any questions that need addressed before we move into the demonstration?
I think, we just had one really great question, and it speaks to it, and maybe that'll be kind of good. We'll also kind of show it when we get to it. But regarding the detail organization and the project organization, this simply asked, well, when you archive a project, does it also archive the details? And I mentioned purposely it does not. Because actually the philosophy is that details actually have a lifetime and an importance far beyond the project. And so the project is long since archived and not even on your file server anymore. But in fact, the details are still there because you still want to be able to rapidly access them for adding to potentially a future project. So it's a very interesting kind of split and also just speaks to the differences between projects and details.
Absolutely. And I would hope that if a land effects project detail folder is someone has the intention of archiving those details within there, they have at at the most been pulled out and then brought into a standard detail library location where they can continue to be accessed from without having to access them from the project detail folder.
And many things. And part of the beauty of having them as blocks also means that, those detail sheets in that archive project folder, which is now like on a USB drive or something long since archived, right? If anything ever happened to the source details in the detail library, you can always W block out the individual details if necessary from an old detail sheet. So the whole system is really structured around the core thing of you don't want to lose a detail. And that's really the core design to it.
Absolutely. Awesome. All right. Well, I see a couple other questions coming in. Um, while we think through those, I'm going to get the demonstration portion of today's webinar set up.
That sounds good.
All right. Are these questions that are coming in, are they anything that we need to answer live right now?
Oh, no, nope, you go right ahead.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Today's demonstration is going to be starting with the project organization tab. So moving up here to the FX admin project list button and getting my project organization open. It's already opened on the organization tab. If you need to make it bigger, you got a little grippy down here. I like to get this guy as large as possible. And just for time's sake today, I'm going to take a existing project, an unassigned project that I have, and I'm going to move it into a new location. And I'm going to expand out these folder trees right here, and we can see we have my unassigned projects right here under this line, and we can see we have our project organization tab here. And I'm going to move this project right here, and we can see that it has a project number assigned of 2022 ED01, and this project is called Clark Middle School Sports Fields. And so I need to make every home possible for this project file to be moved into. And so I'm going to start up here by selecting the project organization. And I'm going to, once that's highlighted, I'm going to say new, and this is going to create our first level of hierarchy within the project organization. So I'm going to say new, and I'm going to say my company projects. And the code here is something for you to determine. Um, but it's hopefully the code is going to be eventually assigned to details as they're added to that project. And hopefully it's something that at a glance you have a general understanding of where that project and where that detail is being stored. So I'm going to say okay here. And it's going to make that folder. And now, looking back at our unassigned projects, and remember we're moving this guy into a home, a detail folder home. I'm going to highlight the My Company projects now. And now I'm going to add in the year. And this code could either be the full year, or you could shorten the year. Either fine. We'll say 22. And this project was listed out by job type. That ED stands for education. So within this 2022 folder now, we need to start making our job type folders if that's how we're going to organize these things. And so now I can say new again here, and I've been prompted for a project or a detail folder. I want to continue making detail folders here. And I'm going to name this education. And we can either keep this code that gets auto placed. I'm going to use the code of ED. We're going to say OK. And now a very important step is that we need to make a specific home for this Clark Middle School Sports Fields project, because each education project that was done in the past in 2022 needs its own home within the education folder. And so with education highlighted, I'm going to say new again and detail folder again for Clark Middle School Sports Fields. And maybe we'll hyphenate that as CMS, Clark Middle School. And we'll say, okay. From here, now we can finally drag and drop this project into its home that we've created. And this process is the exact same if you're building out project organization for the first time, or if you're working backwards and trying to move all of your active projects that began in the past into project organization. And this project organization, again, is just like you're looking at the Detail Explorer. We can drag and drop in here. So I'm going to drag and drop slowly and carefully up here. And now we can see we have the icon here, the piece of paper with kind of like the rainbow sheen on it. That indicates that it is an actual project file versus a project detail folder. And if it wasn't obvious already, only one individual project file can go into an actual folder. That is why you have to make a home for each project. Now, if we had other 2022 educational projects that we had done that we needed to move in here, we would highlight education, and we would say new, and we would continue on with detail folders. Now I have other unassigned projects in here. Say something like this, where we have this 2023 AMA 004 Block 35 project. This one, the AMA stands for American Architects because we're breaking those out by job partners. Again, if we wanted to follow through on this, keeping it under the My Company projects, we would highlight that. We would say new to make a detail folder. We would make one for 2023, and then we would make a new detail folder within 2023 for American Architects. And then we would make a new detail folder within American Architects for the project for block 35. And then finally, we could drag and drop the project file into there. Okay, now moving on into the Detail Explorer. The Detail Explorer works in a very similar way. When you're going to create something, you are going to highlight the uppermost section that you want to create something new within, and then you're going to use this section of buttons here on the side to create things. And we can see here, as I was moving that project in there, because I have show empty categories checked, we can see that the detail folders were being created and logged by our system. Now, if you were to go to the File Explorer to the LandFX details folders, you would not see any of these folders populate until you actually added a detail into this project or into any of these other folders. But with this details highlighted, I'm going to select New. And here is where you would create something like how I have created this company standard details here. And so you'd type your name in, you type your code in, and that's how you can start building out your own personal detail library. I've already created this company standard details here, and I've got some folders in here already. Let's talk really quickly editing and deleting folders. Say I want to add a year designation to this folder because we try to build out as current of detail folders as possible. I'm going to highlight the folder that I want to edit, and then I could add a year if we're getting crazy and we're making new standard detail folders for our company by year or something like that. So I'll say okay, and then that will adjust that. Now to delete a folder, it has to be empty. So I'm highlighting this detail folder right here. No details are populating down here versus if I were to highlight this folder, we can see that I have some irrigation equipment details in there. So I'm going to highlight this folder. I'm going to say delete, and that's going to delete that out. But what if I actually wanted that site details folder to move because I mistakenly in the past put it in a wrong location, and I just want to move all of those details into this new location? Same thing, it's just going to be a drag and drop, and I'm going to drop it down one just to this company standard details folder. I'm going to release, and it's going to ask if I want to copy or move, and I am going to say to move. I'm going to say yes. And then you're going to get a message just confirming that none of the affected details may be currently open. And to proceed, we're going to say yes. I don't have any of those detail files open myself, and no one else on my server or anything has those details open. And I'm going to say yes to proceed. And now we can see that those site details have been moved into my company standard details folder. Now, importing and exporting details is a very cool system. I really love the import details feature because when you export a folder of details, it exports the index XML file as well, which means that our system is going to be able to read in a folder of details as it's imported as it was, as long as the folders that you're importing don't already exist. Now I have a folder ready to import already. And so I've got it on my desktop here, just the detail export that came from another user's LandFX. And inside here, I want to grab the detail XML, and I'm going to say open. And this, I know all of you may not be very accustomed to my personal detail library, but this projects folder actually was not even here. So it gave us that topmost project or that topmost detail folder that those details were living inside of. And now if I break this tree out, I can see that the detail folder that was inside of that in that person's detail library is now also in my detail library, and it came with all of the details that were inside of it. Now, the exporting process, again, is the way that you are going to back up your details. So if I wanted to export out my company standard details, I'm just going to highlight the folder that I want to export, and then I am going to say export. And it's going to ask me to browse for a destination. This is going to be a great opportunity to then look for a hard drive or another location to export those details onto. Okay, getting into preference sets. I have a scenario here that will hopefully explain a lot of things at once that we're going to walk through together. And that scenario is going to be you used our default preferences and made many changes, but now you want your own Office standard and you want our defaults back. So your first step is to get the general preferences screen open, and you're going to find the preference set that you have been editing and using. And so if you've been using our standard Imperial preference set, our default one that comes with your installation, and you've made many modifications to it, and you want to ensure that the company standard preference set has a recognizable name, and you want to make sure that you have our defaults on hand for any sort of testing or blank slates or restarts or anything like that. When you go to make a new preference set, you want to make sure that the preference set that you want to make a copy of, because making a new one makes a copy of whatever is active, you want to make sure that one is active. And so we want to take those changes that we have been making to this Imperial preference set and we want to put them into a new one. So we have that selected down here, and now we'll say manage. When we go to select new, this new preference set again is going to be an exact copy of the preference set, this Imperial one named here in bold that we have been using. And so now we can say again, a hyphen is a great way to stick something to the top, 2025 company standards. And we'll say, okay. And now we've got that new preference set. If we want to, we could select this Imperial one and manage, and we can choose to delete. Make sure you always back up all of your preference sets before. I'm not going to go ahead and delete that one because I want to keep that on here. But say now you did want the land effects defaults back. How do we get those back? Well, you could delete the Imperial preference set out of your preferences folder, and the default one will download. But I'll also use this to show where we keep our defaults on your installation, and I'll show you the restoration process. So I'm going to select restore in here, and I'm going to go to my land effects folder, to the tutorial folder, and in here are our preference sets. I'm going to select the Imperial one. I'm going to select open. I'm going to say no, because I don't want to pull that one in here. But that's going to be the process of how you pull our defaults back in. Now, if I wanted to, I could say restore, say open, and I could say yes to overwrite it. I wouldn't have needed to delete the Imperial preference set that was in there. And I just wrote over that preference set. And now we have a brand new clean slate stock default land effects preference set. So that's that process there. All right, getting into another preferences related scenario. This one is going to be quickly customizing a schedule. And by customizing here, more so mean setting some standards to a schedule, like the index color that the table lines plot on and the text styles that are used in the schedule. So we'll want to make sure that we have a a project assigned that has items within it that we want to schedule because we just need to make a schedule just for the testing purposes. So I'm gonna assign a project that I know has lots of goodies in there. And then we want to make sure that we have a testing preference set assigned. Because if we're in here changing text styles on this preference set rapidly and live, while other people who are still accessing the same preference set are out there creating schedules and these other things, we would be changing the text styles for them. And so we want to have a unique test preference set. I'm going to go ahead and use this default guide that I just restored. And I'm going to go into the planting manager. And I'm going to choose to run a schedule. And this is a great opportunity for me to break down the entire palette schedule. We get lots of questions on, where'd my quantities go? I'm not being prompted to select a work area, these things. And that's often because people have entire palette checked. Now, what entire palette does is it runs a schedule based on everything in your manager. Think of your manager as your palette. That has many use cases. Just getting things reviewed, getting things checked off, getting symbols approved, getting equipment approved, all kinds of things. Now, this project has lots of plants inside of it, so I'm going to simplify it a bit. And now I'm going to, and then from here is where you would want to choose which which schedule option you're most likely going to use. There is a slight difference in layers. If you use both options, go ahead and just run both schedules. I'm going to run one with the grid lines on, and I'm going to say okay. I'll be prompted for the plot scale. Again, when you're testing your preferences, create the environment that you're going to be using land effects in the most. So in this case, I'm going to use just a standard scale that we use a lot. Say okay. I'm going to place that plant schedule. Now, where do we view schedules? Well, we view them on our sheets. So I'm just going to quickly set up a viewport, and I'm going to get this set to our scale so that I can come back to this sheet so that I can review our changes just to make sure that everything is looking correctly. All right. Let's start out with changing the index colors, the line weights that the table lines go on. Now, if you're looking at this and you're like, I have no idea what layer that is. One, we make our layers, according to national CAD standards, but we try to make them as intuitive and legible as possible. But if you're unfamiliar with our layer list within general preferences, we've got this great tool called XLayer up here in the layer tools drop down on FX admin. I'm going to select X layer. I'm going to select one of these table lines. And now I know that I need to go hunting down L Anno schedule text layer. I'm going to say okay. I'm going to go into our general preferences. I'm going to find that layer. I'm going to select to edit it. I'm going to select the index color, and I want this to plot on color 3 on that nice green color. I'm going to say, once that finishes loading and saving itself, we'll get confirmation here that the L Anno schedule text color has changed from color 7 to color 3. I'm going to say OK in the preferences dialog to confirm those changes. And then what I need to do here is I need to delete and purge out that schedule so that I can see those changes come in. And there we go. We've got a plant schedule on maybe an index color that works with your CTB or something like that, right? Now let's get into quickly changing the text styles here. So our text styles for our schedules, they all use the same 3 text styles. And those are these 3 text styles down here at the bottom: the schedule header, the schedule text, and the schedule title. Changing these out is pretty simple. Again, though, they affect everyone using schedules. So just really trying to hit home that you should be making these things, testing them out, and looking at them using test preference sets. So let's say we want, just gonna plug our graphite font right here. this looks amazing. I personally wouldn't change anything about it, but let's just say we want to use a slightly different graphite or something, maybe for the schedule header. I'm going to edit that and I'm going to change it to, let's do narrow bold just cuz. And I'm going to make it just a little larger. I'm going to say, okay. And when that gets done thinking and saving itself in there, it's going to update in the schedule live in the drawing there. And then if I wanted to continue editing, say I want the schedule text to be, maybe classic Arial. I do have a weird liking of Arial. I'm one of those normal people, but I love me a good sans serif font. I'm going to say okay there, and we'll see the graphite font being used in the plant schedule get switched out to Arial. You can say okay in there, and then remember, go back, and because we set up our sheet to view our schedule and our final destination, always make sure you go back and view your schedule in the scenario of how you want it to be looked at, of what you're creating it for, in this case, a plot. All right, folks, getting close on time here. Got one last demonstration for you, and that's going to be creating a project template. And so I'm going to get back into our project list here, back into the project organization. Looking at our unassigned projects. Actually, no, I set up an entire, I'm one step ahead of myself. All right. So I've made a templates project organization detail folder in here, and I've already started breaking down different things that I'm creating to be used as templates because I want to be able to easily find my project templates in the LandFX projects that I set up to become templates. And so I've got within templates here, I've got a planting breakdown and I've got a 2023 company planting template project already created, but this has yet to become a project. And so what I want to do, and I actually want to get into a drawing that hasn't been assigned to anything yet. I want to get back in here and I am going to make this the active project in this drawing. Why? Because I got to get my goodies that I really like. I got to get my LandFX data that I've already set up correctly, and I want to pull it in here so that I don't have to, continue creating these things. So because I'm setting up a planting template, I'm in the plant manager. I'm going to select import. I'm going to go to a project where I know I have a lot of plants inside that I want to pull in, and I can shift click in here to select many at once. I'm going to add them to the project. Now, back in the project list, with this project highlighted, to save it as a template, you just simply select the save as template, and we're just gonna if you're making projects, individual projects strictly to become templates, name your projects the same thing that's going to become the name of the template. This is going to be 2023 standard planting template. We'll say okay. That template's been created. The project list is refreshing. Now down in here in our templates, we see the 2023 standard planting template. Now, say we need to edit the template. We want to add in more tree species into this template. Back in the project, okay, I still have the project that I used to create the template open. I'm going to import again. We're just going to pull in some more trees. Go back to the project list, and we're going to save as template again. I'm going to get this template guy open here so that I can make sure that I enter in the exact same name again. We're going to save as template 2023 standard planting template. I really like to capitalize my T's, I guess, when there's the second letter of a word. And we're going to say, okay. We're going to be prompted to overwrite. We're going to say yes, because this is updating the template. This is how we edit and update templates. We're going to say yes to that. And the template is created. Now, if we want to, when you go to create new projects, you can base it on that template if you so choose to. Again, we really like the idea of importing things as necessary into the projects newly. And that's just our best recommendation. And that's that on the demonstrations for this webinar today. What questions do we have to get into?
We've gotten a few, interestingly, all the questions were basically the same. We're basically just kind of about the specifically the permissions on the detail library.
Gotcha.
That was intriguing. So definitely, I think the key points, actually, I think, Kevin had a great comment that, it could be its own power tip, and I agree. Um, but it's good to note that there is always a very simple way to set any deep part of the detail library locked from being edited, and that's just simply using Windows file permissions. So, that's always something that's in your toolkit. And it's always been a key recommendation, actually. But for certain offices, but that's just simply through your Windows Active Directory, to simply have two user groups. You have your Land Effects admins and then your Land Effects users. And if you have your two user groups like that set up through Windows, you can now go through and say, okay, for the entire Land Effects block library, I can have certain ones be read only for certain users, but specifically through details. You could say, I don't want, and so you can go folder by folder. You could get really fine tuned with just that, and just simply through your standard kind of system of administering your Active Directory. But then also, of course, through Land Effects, you can always set a project to read only. You can set it to by user. And when it is set to read only for any particular user, whether the whole project is read only or whether it's by user and a certain user happens to only have read-only access to a project, they also will not be able to edit any of the details in that detail folder. You have that tool, but then the last little wrinkle is in the detail library itself. If you want to pull that up real quick in the Detail Explorer, um, you might go, well, wait a minute, what about all those standard details at the bottom, all those CSI details? Those are controlled by the preference set. So if the preference set is read-only, all of those details will be read-only. And so that's something to consider too. And that's part of the dilemma of, okay, well, what is a standard detail versus a project detail? And what should go where? And what sort of mix do you want? And also, your fundamental detail dilemma is, are you going to say, okay, for every project, all details are copied to a project folder? Or do you mix and match a little? Do you allow some standard details to be referenced by a project, but you don't have to necessarily copy them to that project folder because the conception is it's a standard detail. This thing was, your standard, 4x4 footing. Nothing's going to change to this detail over decades. It's a standard detail. It would be pointless to be always copying that to a project detail when it's you can just simply reference the standard detail. And then, of course, by having the preference set to read only, or better yet, set to by user, so that it is read only for certain users, you just enforce that no one will ever accidentally change or overwrite any of those standard details. And then you can, like I said, you can then go one step further as an extra precaution. You set the entire standard details folder and all subfolders to read only for that, the user class as opposed to the LandFX admins. So only LandFX admins would then be able to modify those standard details. So, a lot of tools in your toolkit for those sort of advanced detail library management. Um, and let's see, we just had one more question jump in. Um, Walter asked, when changing the schedule colors and layers and fonts, can they be saved program wide or just for a project? And yeah, just want to say that that's the beauty of the preferences, is that all of those settings are saved in the preferences, and you would have any number of projects, in fact, all of your projects, any project that is using those preferences will be using those settings. And so that's just the real magic of LandFX. It is from the ground up is intended to be in a multi-user environment where you have, these are my standards and I want these standards enforced across every project. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to have our weekly CAD meeting where we're arguing about, please put things on the correct layer. I want it to just work, and that's exactly how it has always been designed. But you know what? On that note, it is time for us to turn into a pumpkin. Everybody, thank you so much. Keep the ideas and the questions coming. Any more topics or more subjects you would like to see, please feel free to email us and let us know what you want in a future webinar. But like Jesse said, it is a beautiful day. Get out there and have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next time.